worse than
abstract
that. This is
otherwise.
why it's actually irrational, because I can show you the case where you care at level 10 about the little girl named Leila, and you care at level 8 about the little girl named Leila and her brother named Janti, right? And you care at level 4 if I've added a few more kids, but the little girl named Leila, who you ostensibly care about, is there in each one of these, right? So it
Yeah, but
is
your
irrational.
resources are diminished as
No,
a
but like
consequence
you
of
have
the multiplication of the suffering.
You have $10 to give away every month to help struggling humanity, and you tell me you'll give 10 to Leila this month, and then I catch you in another moment, and I say, well, you know, it's Leila and her brother, so it's like if you only can give 10. I understand, but you know, the problem is actually worse than I suspected. And you say, well, actually, I'm just going to give 8, right? It's not coherent with how much you cared about Leila in the first place.
We do know quite well that the heuristics that we use to orient ourselves in the world can be placed into frameworks where they produce contradictory outcomes. But that doesn't mean that the heuristics themselves are deeply flawed. It's a problem with the work of people like Kahneman and Tversky.
Yeah,
is they take perfectly valid heuristics
for them. We need to correct for them because they're producing a reliable result that we recognize.
Yeah, but no, you can put them in a
non-functional.
situation where they produce a counterproductive response, but that doesn't mean that generally speaking in most situations they don't produce a useful outcome, because the question is, why in the hell would have they evolved if they didn't produce a useful outcome most of the time?
They evolved to live with 150 people with whom we're related and to be terrified of the people in the next valley who may want to kill and eat us.
Yes,
right?
and
that's our ancient circumstance,
right.
which doesn't map onto a common humanity of 7 billion people trying to figure out how to get to Mars without killing each other.
Well, it does map onto it sometimes, unfortunately, because there are many times when we still face the same kind of threats. In fact, it maps onto
the hierarchy that
your
we're
concerns,
trying to climb
Sam.
here.
You wouldn't be concerned about the fundamentalist terror of Islam if you weren't driven by those essentially tribal considerations.
No,
and I'm not suggesting that it's wrong.
It doesn't require, a mere identification with humanity, it can ground not wanting to be murdered by people who are identified with a subset of humanity, right? Like I don't need to be part of a smaller tribe to care that people will murder me over burning a Quran, right? It's clearly counterproductive that we live in a society where some objects are held with such totemic attachment for irrational reasons by many, many millions of people, where that you should be sympathetic with this. Our free speech is actually canceled on this point, right? I mean,
Yes.
You literally can't produce cartoons.
Look,
there are scholarly works about the cartoon prices that don't show the cartoons.
We have no argument whatsoever
Okay.
between us about the lack of utility of certain
You don't have to be
totalitarian
identified
presuppositions.
as a Christian or a Jew to push back against that. You just have to be a human being that sees the dysfunction of a smaller kind of provincialism.
Well, the thing that I'm struggling with is that I still can't understand in what your ethos is grounded. Because you claim like a transcendental rationalism, but you won't identify the structures that produce it. It's a black box. And when I try to push you on the absolute nature of your ethical claim, which is that the bad life is worse than the good life, and that we should, in fact, universally work towards the good life, it doesn't seem to me that you'll accept the proposition that that's a universal claim.
No, it is. Well, should is irrelevant here. It's just the fact that there is, it's the utility, again, to bring it back to stories, which is, as you know, not my emphasis, but it is yours. The utility of stories is not something I'm arguing against. I mean, there's no question that certain stories are incredibly compelling, and in our conversation with one another, the moment you begin to frame something in terms of a story, people become much more interested, right? Like if 90% of what we said together tonight were framed, each point we were making as a matter of philosophy or science were framed in, well, actually, yesterday I was walking down the street and I met this guy, who's a terrifying looking guy, and all of a sudden people become much more interested, right? And then that's not an accident. And that says something deep about us that we could understand in evolutionary terms, and we might in fact want to creatively leverage to be better people.
Yes.
And to have better conversations.
Definitely.
Yes. So
that's what I think.
There's nothing that I say in opposition to religious dogmatism and religious sectarianism that discounts that reality. And that's a psychological reality. It's a cultural reality, and I'm not against making the most of it. My basic claim, however, is that we never need to believe that one of our books may not have a human origin in order to do that effectively. You can be just as compelled by the example of somebody like Jesus or some more modern person who strikes you as a moral hero and deeply wise, without believing anything on insufficient evidence. And as you alluded to, purely fictional stories about superheroes can have immense effect on us, and that's something we could understand and also leverage. But again, that takes us out of the religion business, and that's all I've been arguing for. There's a profound net negative that we are paying the price for every day by believing in paradise, right? A belief that this life, it probably doesn't matter very much at all, because we get what we really want after we die is, forget about the evidentiary basis for that belief. It's ruinous for prioritizing what we should be prioritizing in this life. And
I agree with that, by the way.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yep.
And also my sense that the positive can be had without those structures. So if you're talking about the contemplative experience, like, is it possible to wake up tomorrow morning feeling like Meister Eckhart, right? Feeling like you're just inseparable from the pure capital B being that is consciousness, right? And there's no separate self there, right? A self-transcending union with everything you can perceive, right? I think that can be had without any kind of religious dogmatism. That's just a matter of paying close enough attention to the nature of consciousness. So the contemplative life is one baby in the bathwater we can save. The ethical life is another baby we can save. You don't have to presuppose anything on insufficient evidence to argue about what is right and wrong and good and evil in the 21st century. And on certain points, even if we felt that really believing the fiction was advantageous to people, depending on which fiction you're talking about, there's too much evidence against it. You can't decide to believe something for which you have no evidence simply because of the good effects, the good experience it will give you, or you imagine it will give you. Now, you can't be telling yourself, I have no evidence for this thing, but I know life would be better if I believed it to be true, and so therefore I really believe it's true.
You don't think people do that all the time?
I don't think they do. I think they do things much more like we're talking, the metaphorical truth we're talking about. We act as if things are true without forming any strong propositional claim, and that's fine. That's fine. That has its own utility. I mean, so I'm not, if that's all people were doing under the aegis of religion, I wouldn't spend much time worrying about religion. I mean, to some degree, that's what people do, as you say, going into caring about things that at bottom we really shouldn't care about. So the World Cup is on right now, and we literally billions of people care down to their toes what happens to this little ball as it traverses a lawn, right? And if it goes into the net, it really matters. And if it fails to, it really matters. And
it always matters if we hit the target, Sam.
But this is something we have manufactured to care about, right?
It's something that speaks to us unbelievably.
It's quite literally a game. This is a game that people are playing, but some people taking it further than seems truly rational is part of the fun. But the people who can't turn that off.
It's a metaphor. Soccer's a metaphor.
Yeah, but there are people who the fullback who kicks an own goal and then goes back to his South American village and gets murdered, right? He's surrounded by people who are taking the game too seriously.
Yeah,
right?
okay, I agree.
Yeah, and so my problem with religion is that so much of the time we're meeting those people, and we're not criticizing those people. We have no place to stand to criticize those people because we're so attached to the game.
Fair enough. Look, why don't we do this?